Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm thrilled to welcome Brandon Siri to the podcast today to talk about Rio Lobo, the final film by director Howard Hawks, released about 50 years ago at the end of December of 1970. How are we doing, Brandon?
Oh, I'm doing great. How you doing, Brian?
Doing well. For those of you who are just listening and are not watching this as a video, Brandon has some Marvel posters behind him of Black Widow. And is that Thor Ragnarok?
No, that's Guardians 2.
Oh, it's
Guardians of the Galaxy
Guardians
Volume
2. Okay, cool. So are those two like of all the Marvel movies coming out, is it Black Widow that you're really excited to see? Because I feel
2.
like that movie's been delayed, what, 3 times now?
I think there's just a drought of Marvel films right now, and they have so much already like in the can, like edited, ready to go that I think we'll take anything. It's
Yeah, so
January. So we're getting WandaVision here any minute, like in the next couple
yeah,
of days.
so we're recording this at the end of December, and this episode's dropping in mid-January. We've just been through the first year in a long time with really no Marvel content, right? All of 2020, was there anything?
No, there was
Yeah.
nothing. The last one was Spider-Man Far From Home.
Okay, so that was July of 2019. So it's been a while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was the last one. So
Um, so if John Wayne were alive today, Brandon, would he be a part of the Marvel universe, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They would find a role for him. He would be perfect in a number of maybe some of the villain roles, even. I think that would be great. It's like they did with Robert Redford. Come on. He
Yeah.
was pretty good.
Robert Redford was great in which one was that? The Winter Soldier? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun when they get like kind of a big name, a legendary actor to play kind of a supporting role like that. I feel like, yeah, like older John Wayne, if he had been like he were alive today, I feel like he could have gotten some better roles than he did at the end of his career, which would have been in the 1970s, the decade we were looking at for the podcast. So before we get to our movie today, I wanted to just kind of ask you kind of what role has movies played in your life. We go back many years. We became good friends in middle school and high school, saw lots and lots of movies together. Kind of when do you remember, Brandon, getting into movies? Was it like when you were really, really young? Was it later on? Like when did movies become important to you?
So I remember when I was a kid, I was the kid who is like, 4 and 5, and I would watch Ghostbusters like every other day, right? So I'd watch films very young, like something today that my kids don't do. And then what really got me into films, into wanting to make them, was probably around the same time as you, like third grade, Jurassic Park comes out, and like that, I just remember that was the film that
Yeah.
like was mind blowing because of the visual effects, the story, the directing,
Yeah,
everything.
Jurassic Park was huge. I feel like there were some movies like 90, 91, 92 that I saw that I liked, but Jurassic Park was the mind-blowing movie that really opened up a lot of eyes of younger people to get into movies and really start becoming interested in film. And yeah, that was definitely the one for me too. What is it about Jurassic Park that still just, has such a lasting impact?
It's just such a great film. It's got everything. I think it's better than the book. It's it's
I'd agree
got
with that.
great yeah, great acting. It's still, the visuals even today still hold up. The practical effects blended with the CGI is the way to go. I wish they would do that more
Yeah.
because you notice it, you know, and it was just like an almost perfect film.
How does the CG in Jurassic Park still look great today? That kind of blows my mind. Like the shot of the full-on T-Rex coming out I mean, it's dark and it's raining, so you can't see it really well, but that shot still looks incredible almost 30 years later, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, that was like the first time when they like just nailed it. And it took them a couple more years to figure out special effects. Obviously, like some of special effects from that uh decade did not
Hmm.
hold up very well. There was a lot of like really shiny things. Like everything looked like slimy plastic.
Yeah.
But nothing in Jurassic Park felt like that. They did such a good job, and I think it's because I think they made the movie first, if I can remember, in like almost like a stop motion animation, and they like did a lot of modeling, and I
Hmm.
think that helped. Like even when you compare the
True.
first
Hmm.
the Lord of the Rings films versus the Hobbit films, you can tell a difference in like quality of CGI versus just like rush CGI because of I think what they did was more modeling and stuff like that, and it feels right.
Yeah.
Think of the explosions in Independence Day. How great those still look pretty good.
When it's the model explosions,
It's the
those
modeling
last. Yeah.
explosion, stuff like that. It's a blend of practical and CGI. It just looks so much better. And
Yeah.
then even like what we just saw was like, Mandalorian, like you and I we've discussed, is they have a lot of practical effects with their aliens, and it pays off.
Yeah, you see a lot of the creatures on that show are real, are actually there on the screen, and you can tell to this day, you can tell when it's really there. Yeah. So we didn't know each other when the first two Jurassic Parks came out. We did go see the third one together, Jurassic Park 3, which is celebrating its 20th anniversary. It's been 20 years since that movie came out. And we saw lots of movies together. Do you remember the first movie we saw together in a theater? What was the first one?
Was it Thin Red Line?
The Thin Red Line. What a way to kick it off, man. Terrence Malick.
That was a pretty good film too.
Yeah. And throughout high school, we got in trouble a couple times. You remember the 13 days Finding Forrester incident? That was I tell that story sometimes. You remember that story?
Oh yeah, that's a classic. How to talk your way into free movies.
Yeah.
101.
So we went to see 13 Days, the Kevin Costner movie, like the period film from like it's like set in the early 60s, right? And I would like to watch it again today. Maybe I'd appreciate it more, like it more now. But I just remember being like just bored stiff for 2 hours in that movie. And I was so upset. I was so mad. I was like, we're going to go see a second movie. I didn't pay to get into this theater just to watch this piece of crap. So we were like, well, let's sneak into Finding Forrester. That's how badass we were back in 2000, 2001, right? We actually would have been like 20 years ago, like this week, something like that. But we were like, we're going to go see Finding Forrester. Sean Connery. And one of not the manager, I think he was just like an employee there. Remember, he was really old. He was like in his 70s or something.
He was like the security guard, the mall security guard.
Yeah. So he caught us sneaking into Finding Forrester, and I remember he yelled at us. He was really upset. And he had us go down to see the manager at the front of the theater. And, we're kind of nervous, like, oh my gosh, are they going to ban us from the theater? But like, this guy is pissed. And so I think he had us or me like tell this lady like what happened. And I just told the truth. I said, well, we saw 13 Days. We really hated it. And so we decided we see another movie. And I think she was just maybe having an off day or something. But she just kind of nods and goes, oh, okay. So, you know what? Here's 2 free tickets to see a movie.
Yeah. Oh, that was awesome.
And I remember the old guy turned to us and said something like, see, this is what happens. I don't think he understood.
Yeah, well, we did miss the time that we were trying to see, so we went and had like dinner, and then we came back and saw the next.
So we get 2 free movie tickets. We leave, we go have dinner, and then we go to the later showing, which I believe was more expensive, right? And then use those 2 tickets to watch Finding Forrester, which is a great film. That's probably my favorite memory of us, like the craziest memory of us going to the movies. But yeah, so we've been friends since 1998. No.
Yeah.
1998, right? Yeah, that's right. Like early 98. Yeah. And we've been seeing movies ever since. We just saw Tenet in September. We have an episode about that. If you want to check it out, it's on the Patreon page and on YouTube. We talked about Christopher Nolan's career. And we were going to go see other movies together, including James Bond, but hasn't happened, Brandon. We could go see Wonder Woman. That is technically going to theater.
Part of me wants to go support it, but then at the same time, it's like, I can just watch it from home.
It's so hard. I'm like, well, I can just watch it on HBO Max. But then I'm like, no, Brian, support the theaters.
Yeah. I think if it was a different film, I might go. Like if it was the Godzilla one that they're supposedly making or something. I'm not a huge DC guy. I'm a Marvel guy, and it just
okay.
I've never seen any DC movies in theaters, so I think I can justify it that way. I would not have seen it anyways.
Yeah, James Bond, I will go see in a theater. Like I'm not gonna watch that at home.
Bond was gonna be in both. I would pick the theater.
Yeah. Like Black Widow, I think I would go to the theater. I'm not as passionate about Wonder Woman as others, so I'm not like, oh my gosh, I have to see it in IMAX. I have to see it on a giant screen. I'm
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, actually, that'd be nice to just watch that at home, like at night, like with dinner or something. Just watch Wonder Woman. Um, but fingers crossed, Brandon. 2021, we're rounding the turn. Hopefully, some good movies come back to the theater, and great movies like Rio Lobo, right?
Oh yeah, Rio Lobo.
this
What a way to
this
finish
what
1970.
a way. This is the last. I'm doing one more episode about the 43rd annual Academy Awards to kind of wrap up the year of 1970. But this is my last recording about like specifically about a 1970 movie. What a way to go out.
I have a question. Do you think that is this a studio film? Like, guys, we got John Wayne. He's in contract. We're gonna have to crank something out, or is this like somebody's passion project? Because
Oh no, I don't think this was a passion project for
I didn't get
anybody.
any passion out of this
This
movie at all. I feel like John Wayne, again, this is later in his career. I feel like he was like, I'm here for the paycheck.
yeah.
I'll be here when I need to be here. And
John Wayne just
that's it.
worked and worked and worked. I mean, I don't is there a year in his filmography between like Stagecoach was his breakthrough in 1939 by John Ford, and then his last film was The Shootist in 1976. Is there a year in there that he didn't make a film? I mean, this guy was just a workaholic. He was acting all the time. So
Yeah,
you look at his filmography, it is just packed. Like there's no stretch of time, even towards the end where he was getting sick and like he was still working all the way to the end.
yeah. I was reading that he was even partly sick when he was making this
He
one.
was
And
sick, yeah. Mm-hmm.
there's a couple of the scenes where again he's in a fight and like you can tell that's not him. You're like, this man is not doing that. He would for sure be injured.
I did
Like,
make a note. I'm like, I mean, it's not so much that he's older, that's fine, but he's looking a little rough in this one.
nowhere near in shape. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that was the other thing. He's portraying an action star, and he's just like, but I don't see like he's not like getting in shape for the role. He's just like doing this project.
He's like, okay, where do I show up? What set do I go to? Where's the paycheck?
Yeah, you know, and that's what you're kind of getting, and so you wonder like, is it was the director just like getting the best performance? Was he, or is he just like? Because again, I kind of like the beginning of the film. You know,
Yeah, the best part of the movie is the first 15 minutes. That's the best
first
part.
15 minutes, I was like, this could be kind of good, and then it just
it kind of does a nosedive after that. It's not a movie that you're watching and like this is just horrendous. This is just awful. It's just kind of like on one note, like for the rest of the movie. And I was just, we were talking about a little bit before we started recording. It is funny, like in all the years we've known each other, I don't think we've ever watched a John Wayne movie before, and he is one of the most famous actors to have ever lived.
Right? No, we've been Clint Eastwood. Man, that's what we've been watching. I've watched all the Clint Eastwood ones. I haven't watched. I think I vaguely remember watching like the original True Grit.
Okay, which I just watched last year for its 50th anniversary. I actually really enjoyed that one. That's got a great story.
Yeah, like that's the one I think that might be the only one I ever watched.
Okay. Yeah. My experience with John Wayne, I've very few films that I've seen of his. Probably the best one is The Searchers. Have you heard of that one? That's from the 50s. One of his most famous films by John Ford. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. I mean, there's a few that I've seen that I really like, but I think he's in more than 100 films, like maybe like far more than 100 films, and I've seen maybe 5 or 6 of them. There's a lot to get to.
Yeah.
So before we get to more about the movie, I just wanted like our thoughts about the movie. I wanted to go over just briefly the plot summary for those listeners who may not be familiar with this one. And then I've got a few little beats of trivia here to talk about before we get into our questions about the film. This was kind of a tough one to summarize. This was kind of, did you have the same experience, Brandon? I struggled kind of like following the plot of this one, like what everyone's motivation was. It wasn't like 100% clear to me for a lot of the movie. I'm like, it stops to have like a romance between these two side characters, and I'm like, who are they? What do they want? I was doing a lot of that.
Yeah, they're all over the place, and again, it feels like the movie was almost like broken up into different sections. Like the first part of it is so different, and I mean, you could get into some real deep discussions even about again the portrayal of like Southern soldiers. Because then obviously this takes place right at the end of the
Civil War. Yeah.
Civil War is right at the very end of the war, and like the way that they're portrayed is very interesting. You don't see that portrayal of a Southern soldier, like usual. And then the way women are portrayed was super. uh, gosh, that had to be really interesting portrayal of women in 1970. Like that had to be one of the final films where the misogyny is just so rampant.
Yeah, and we'll get into that too. This film feels very much of like it feels like it's a movie that was made 10 years before this. Like it
Yeah,
does not feel like a 1970 product. Like I'm just like,
yeah,
when did this come out? So real briefly, so the Civil War in this movie is in its last days, as you just said. The when the Union Army payroll train is hijacked, that's kind of the opening action sequence. That's the best sequence of the movie, which I read later in a review. I don't know if this is 100% true. Apparently, the actual robbery sequence was shot by second unit.
oh,
Howard Hawks did not like direct that sequence, which is like, why make this movie if you're not going to be a part of that? But so John Wayne plays Colonel Cord McNally. He has a friend named Ned who's fatally injured in the raid. That's a solid scene. That scene where he sees his friend and he's got like a broken neck and he's like, there's nothing I can do. So, I don't know. Sorry, bud, but it's not going to end well. Eventually, the two leaders of the raid are captured, but they will not reveal the traitor who sold them information about the train. Soon, McNally encounters one of the traitors, Whitey Carter, who's from Rio Lobo. He is shot dead by a young woman named Shasta Delaney, who's been on the run from him and some other people. One of the Confederates who hijacked the train, Captain Pierre Cordona, is now in good graces with McNally, and they and Shasta travel to Rio Lobo to find another traitor named Ketchum, who's wreaking havoc in a small town, the town of Rio Lobo, and needs to be done away with. Is that kind of accurate? Is that what you got out of it? I had to
yeah,
kind of like
that was it. He teams up with, he teams up with the Southern captain, and they go for whatever reason. They're going down to Rio Lobo to
yeah.
get to find the guy and kill him for being the traitor.
Yeah, but I roped you into watching this because on IMDb it said like it makes it sound like it's a revenge thriller. Like John Wayne's friend is killed in this raid and he goes after. Like I thought that's what this was going to be, but it's not really that. Like the friend isn't really referred to much again, right? For the rest of the
No,
movie, it's not like
the
a revenge thriller the way we come to expect them.
oh no, not at all. You know,
It's like
the guy
by
the
that
guy dies at the beginning, and he just like walks up to him, "Hey, you're my best friend. You're dead. Oh, I'm
yeah.
you know," and that's about it.
I mean,
Technically,
this movie takes its time, and we even get a scene of him at the dentist. When he's at the dentist, I said, okay, like there is no urgency to this movie at all. Like, what is happening here?
yeah.
You know?
All the characters they kept introducing more and more characters as it went, and like
Yeah,
I liked the first two. I was fine with the captain,
yeah.
the southern captain who he teamed up with, and then they added in the lady, and then they added in the drunk guy with the lazy eye.
That's right.
And they just keep adding all these characters, like we're supposed to be like building this amazing like hero posse, but they never come off as a hero posse. And I never really felt what was going on. The villains who took over Rio Lobo, I never really felt them being all that villainous either. Like,
Yeah, they're all pretty nice,
I didn't. Nobody's motivations in the film made all that much sense.
Yeah.
You know?
I think Howard Hawks, which we'll get into, I think the director was a little bit checked out at
Yeah.
this point in his career. This is at the very end. So I have some background information I wanted to share. The first one, the film was written by Lee Brackett and Burton Wool. Nice job, gentlemen. And was the final film directed by Howard Hawks, who had a career in directing going all the way back to the 1920s. So he was directing films for about 45 years. This was the third Hawks film starring John Wayne, which varied the idea of a sheriff defending his office against belligerent outlaw elements in the town after Rio Bravo and El Dorado. So even the title of this movie is similar to the other two.
Yeah.
It's like the trilogy. It's the Howard Hawks, John Wayne trilogy on a similar theme, similar story. This is the third and final.
Yeah. I looked up because I wanted to see what that other one was. What was the other one called? Rio, the other Rio one.
Rio Bravo. That's a better. I've seen that. It's a lot better. It's a more famous film than
I was
this one.
looking it up for a sec. I thought this was like a remake of the film of that film.
Oh, okay.
It's similar in the description, and I was like, wait, he made the same movie again with the same lead actor?
Yeah.
Like,
But let's not fool anyone. Let's put Lobo, not
yeah, let's go.
Bravo.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what when I looked up this film initially, I was like, wait, isn't there a movie called Rio Bravo with John Wayne? I looked it up, same director. I'm like, oh. So
Yeah.
they're just kind of like, exploring similar territory here. Um, the film was meant to be shot in Durango, Mexico on a budget of 5 million. However, shooting on the movie Lawman took up facilities there. So Hawks and Cinema Center had to spend an extra $1 million to allow shooting at Old Tucson Studios and near Los Angeles. So they had to pony up some more money for this. Not 5 million, $6 million. This looked like a $6 million movie to you, Brandon? $1970?
It looks like an episode of a TV show from
Like half
1970.
a million?
Yeah, like a half a million
I
budget.
mean, for 1970, $6 million, that's a lot for a film in
Oh yeah,
that year.
how much of that just went to John Wayne, honestly?
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what was John Wayne making, was he taking any profits from the movies? Like those last few films he did, I wonder how much money he was making. So as you said earlier, John Wayne was in poor health during filming and frequently had difficulty getting on and off his horse. He was also recovering from tearing a ligament in his shoulder on a previous film. So he wasn't in great spirits, I think, on this one.
Yeah.
He was like, what do I do? Where's the horse? I guess I'll get on the horse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's a presence, though. I mean, when you pay for John Wayne, you get John Wayne.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like I think this movie would be worse if it was like if it was a lead actor who had no charisma. Like John Wayne gets you to the end of this movie.
Yes.
Like even though he's not our greatest actor in history, like there's something about him that you enjoy watching on film. Especially for me, I'm not a big Western person, and I'm not, like this is not my kind of genre, but it's fun to watch John Wayne. Like even in lesser works, like that, he kind of gets you through the movie.
Yeah.
He's kind of funny, and he's got a really great presence, even towards the end. So during a break in filming Rio Lobo, John Wayne collected his Best Actor Oscar for True Grit from Barbara Streisand. When he returned to the Rio Lobo set, every member of the cast was wearing an eye patch, including his horse, to greet him.
That was funny back then.
That wouldn't fly today. That wouldn't get a big laugh from the star.
Oh man.
He did you know that he won an Oscar for Best Actor? John Wayne?
I did know that.
Because he was not, I don't think he was nominated for anything else in his long career. I think he just got the one nomination for True Grit, and he won.
Yeah, I think so.
But like
a lifetime.
Yeah, kind of a lifetime achievement, more so than others. But be kind of weird going through your career if like, oh, I lost Best Actor at the Oscars to John Wayne.
Yeah.
It's like when Adam Sandler won the what did he win for Uncut Gems, the Film Independent Spirit Award?
Oh yeah.
And in his speech, he was like the other four of you, however many were in his category, he was like, you got to go the rest of your life telling everybody I lost Best Actor to Adam Sandler. Even though I thought Sandler gave the best performance of the year. I thought he was incredible in Uncut Gems. Did you see that film, Uncut Gems?
Yeah. No, Uncut Gems.
Did you like it?
I liked it.
It's not an easy watch, but
no, I thought it was going someplace different. And
okay.
I kind of like the last 20 minutes hits, and you're like, that's it?
Oh, no, I loved it. I thought it was great. And because I've been waiting for I was like, someone's got to give Adam Sandler a really great dramatic vehicle. Punch Drunk Love was really great, but it'd been a while. So I don't know. I thought it was fun. A couple more things. So I don't know if you know this, Sherry Lansing, who plays the woman who gets the scar, who shoots the guy dead at the end. She would go on to become the first woman to head a major Hollywood studio. She became president of 20th Century Fox in 1980. And in 1992, she became the chairman of Paramount, stepping down as CEO in 2004. So had you heard of that name before? Did you know of Sherry Lansing?
No idea.
So she was like a big player in Hollywood, 20th Century Fox and Paramount. She was one of the producers of Fatal Attraction in the 80s. So she had a very brief acting career. And then I think soon after she decided I'd like to work behind the scenes. I want to do something else. And she really made a great career for herself after doing some smaller supporting roles in movies like Rio Lobo. I think she probably went to the screening of Rio Lobo and was like, all right, I gotta do something else. you know, but yeah, she's outside of John Wayne, she's probably the most famous figure from this movie. And Howard Hawks too. So two things left. Rio Lobo was the 20th highest grossing film of 1970, but it was still considered a box office bomb. It made $4 million on a $6 million budget, so it lost money. Almost.
Tragic.
We could have had another Rio movie in like 73 if this had been a hit, right?
Didn't have enough. It just didn't have enough word of mouth buzz, I guess.
Not. I want to know what people were saying to each other when they walked out of the theater after Rio Lobo played. Were they just like, "Wow, that was just that's the film of the year"?
Yeah. Wow. Geez. Well, it's just funny. You watch it again. The opening is such a big action sequence for the time, and it looks great. It's the train heist is fantastic, and there's not really a whole lot else that goes on action wise until the very last shootout. Other than that, they pistol whip each other constantly. It's like pistol whip here, pistol whip there. It's just like
there's that when Whitey gets shot by the woman in the what was that? Remember when she's got the gun underneath the table?
Oh, under the table.
Like that's a good minute of tension. That's a good sequence, but very, very long stretches.
That's the thing with that
nothing
scene,
happening.
Okay, so they walk in there and they're all sitting there, and then she just like those guys walk in with badges and they want to take her in, and then she shoots them, and then McNally, John Wayne's character, and everybody else there just believes the lady. What happens if she really was wanted? It was stuff like that where it's just
well, she's very pretty, Brandon. They just
she was so
they
pretty.
go with that.
Like, well, ma'am, I guess we'll take you. And then they take her upstairs, put her in bed, and undress her.
Then they undress her. Which it's not something I think they would do in a film today.
I'm watching it. I'm like, wait a second, who's the good guys and who are the bad guys? This is all getting real.
Well, at least there wasn't like a John Wayne romance subplot with her. That would have been like, I'm out.
Remember, it was like the next scene. So they're out camping in the woods, out in the desert, and they wake up the next morning, and she wakes up next to
John Wayne.
John Wayne, and he's just like, well, how did she get here? And they're like spooning. They're full on spooning.
And isn't he like, well, you're just really warm? Is that what she said?
Really warm and soft. He's like, well, I hope.
He says something. He says something kind of flirtatious to her, right? Like,
he says
something. And it's just awkward.
He's probably like, I don't know, 25, and he's like 65.
Yeah, he's in his 60s. Probably around now. He's in his 60s here. The last thing to share. What do you think Quentin Tarantino said about this movie, Brandon? Quentin Tarantino has a quote about Rio Lobo. Do you think he loved it?
I think he probably respects it for what it is.
So Quentin cited Rio Lobo as one of the reasons Quentin wants to have a short directing career. Have you heard about this where he's like 10 and done? Like he said, I'm going to make 10 feature films and that's it. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was his 9th film. He considers, as do I, Kill Bill as one film. I kind of consider that one film. That was split. It was split later, so I don't consider that two different movies. I can't remember if Death Proof is counted in there. I think it is, even though that was part of another movie.
Either. That was too short.
Maybe not. Let's count them. Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, Kill Bill, Death Proof, if that's counted. That would be 5.
Yeah.
Inglourious Bastards, Django Unchained, The Hateful Eight, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So that's 9. So Death Proof is considered one of the 9. So he has said he's going to do 10 and that's it. He's done. He's going to do other stuff. He might direct like television. He might write books. Like that's what he keeps saying. So if that's true, there's just one left, which is crazy to think he might only do one more movie. But so he said, the most cutting edge artists, the coolest guys, the hippest dudes, they're the ones that stay at the party too long. They're the ones that make those last 2 or 3 movies that are completely out of touch and do not realize the world has turned on them. I do not want to make Rio Lobo. That's what he said.
That's
So
true
that's,
though.
yeah. He's
We
also
got
talked
that.
about Billy Wilder, whose last movie, Buddy Buddy, is I have not seen. I've heard is really bad. So some of these great legendary figures who have 10 plus classic films on their resume, that last one or two, they're not any good. And I
Yeah,
do
you
think
guys
he
talked
has
about
I do think he has something truthful to say about Howard Hawks' career here. I think he might have gone 5 years too long as a director.
yeah, you and I talked about this last time too, with even like the Spielbergs and some of the greater '80s directors, where it's just like the stuff they're doing now
Oh
is just
yeah. Yeah, our
so
episode about
bad
the
and hilarious.
witches, directed by Robert Zemeckis, which you can find on
Yeah,
on Patreon. We talked about the witches, and that was, I mean, Robert Zemeckis. What happened to him? Like, he was cutting edge, lots of great stuff in the '80s and '90s. Even I mean, we can argue about the Polar Express, Beowulf, Christmas Carol run he did,
yeah,
which I didn't hate as much as some other people did, but Flight was solid. I liked The Walk, but the last three have been like, what is happening with this guy? Because I love his older films. Spielberg too. I mean, Spielberg is one of our favorite directors, right? He's one of your favorites, right?
yeah.
He's the favorite of most people who love movies. And I've liked some of his work here and there for the last 20 years, but it's been a long time since I loved a Spielberg movie, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I would agree. I even went back as far recently as War of the Worlds. I saw it was on. I was like, oh, I've seen that one in a
I've
long
never
time.
liked that one.
And I was just like, man, it's not.
The,
It's
the
just not
opening's good.
there. Yeah, the opening when the like stuff is happening,
Yeah.
chaos, it's good. But then it just after that,
Once Tim Robbins shows up, and I love Tim Robbins usually, I'm like, that movie just doesn't work for me. I'm just like, when the sun just shows up at the end, I'm like, what?
it just walks out. Hey, I'm good.
Yeah, that one doesn't work for me at all. Although I like the special effects in War of the Worlds, still holds up pretty well. Looks pretty cool.
Yeah,
Yeah. So some of these directors, they stay around too long, especially the really prolific ones. The ones who
mhm.
are making films every 2 years. Just it's what they do. They make
Yeah,
films. Oh, the material's not great. I'll make something of it. We'll do something with it. Oh,
yeah,
let's do a remake of The Witches. Yeah, that'll be fun.
yeah. Let's just do it.
It's like, I mean, just think of what The Witches could have been in the hands of like a Guillermo del Toro or someone who really like had a connection to that material, who really loved it. You don't really sense Zemeckis's passion for The
No,
Witches in the new remake, and you do not, at getting to Rio Lobo, Brandon, you do not sense any amount of passion from director Howard Hawks in Rio Lobo at
no,
all.
no. Even just down to the cinematography, like I don't know who he used or how involved he was, but even the cinematography is like as stale as can be. That's what I was saying. It looks like a TV show, and it's like
Yeah, it does have a feel of a TV movie or something.
that's when you mentioned that the first the opening scene with the train is a second unit. I'm not surprised if that's the case because that would explain why it's such a fluid, dynamic scene. It's
Yeah,
you
there's
know,
some cool moments. I like when it's hitting, like the train's hitting the ropes. That's a really cool part, and them throwing the beehive, and like that actually looked pretty real. Like when it goes inside and like the bees, like that looked pretty realistic. I thought that
yeah,
was strong, and I mean, it's a good 5 minutes of tension of like, what's coming, and it's right at the beginning. So you're like, all right, let's do this. Let's go. And John Wayne's going to come on the scene and he's going to take these guys down. And that's not really the movie we get after
no, it's not even close.
that.
This movie,
It sets up a film that doesn't really deliver, which I feel like is part of the problem.
yeah,
you know?
there's yeah, there's no satisfaction in any of the scenes when he gets the guys he's looking for, and it's just so weird.
So yeah, so we said before that this came out at the very end of 1970, but I would say Rio Lobo feels like a movie that would have come out in like 63, like
Yeah,
65. Like I'm watching this, I'm like, I mean, I've watched a lot especially for the podcast. I've watched a lot of 1970 films, and a lot of the films are pushing us forward, pushing us into a new decade. Films like Five Easy Pieces and MASH, right? Some of these films that are very much kind of the 70s. But then you have some of these movies that are kind of pulling us back. And Rio Lobo is definitely one of those. Like this is a product of an earlier era, you know. I mean, this
yeah.
could have been made in the 50s and it'd probably be almost the same. I mean, did you see this was rated G? It has a G rating. I'm like, how many movies where people are getting shot and killed left and right are
Yeah,
rated G? Like not even PG. I mean, you don't really see much blood in this movie. But I mean, he's not even. I mean, even Alfred Hitchcock at the end of his career makes Frenzy in 1972, which is a film I can't wait to talk about on the podcast. And that film, he makes like a hard R rating with nudity, with violence, with blood. Hitchcock's like, oh, after 50 years, I can finally make a movie and show everything. I'll do it. Howard
yeah,
Hawks, in his last movie, had an opportunity to make a really gritty film. Like he could have gone somewhere different with this, said, oh, I can make an R-rated film and really go somewhere. But it feels so stale, feels so of like 10 years prior. Like he's not doing anything interesting after the MPAA, rating system has now started in 68. He could have done anything he wanted in 70 with this. He could have made an R-rated John Wayne movie, and that could have been really cool. But we don't get
yeah.
that. We get a G-rated, just like blah, bland movie that just does not have anything going for it outside of that opening sequence and John Wayne, who's always fun.
Yeah. Yeah. The only other character, I mean, the other two characters, the side characters there were the one was Captain Pierre, really,
Captain Pierre.
From where was he from?
Yeah.
New Orleans or something.
Yeah.
And he's the Southern soldier who agrees to help him. He was the charmer. Obviously, he was just a good-looking guy who he's just there to flirt with people. That's about
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah. He flirts with the pretty girl. They get a scene together, and I'm like, am I supposed to care about this relationship?
Yeah. His outfit was interesting too. Like the costume he was in, it reminds me of the scene. Remember in Back to the Future when they dress him up in like the pink cowboy outfit to send him back in time? Like that's his outfit, like that cheeseball looking cowboy.
Yeah.
And then you have Shasta, the you know stereotypical like little old me. And then, she's just there to flirt with everybody. you know, I mean, she was an attractive lady, but she serves almost no point to the plot other than I need to come with you. I need to come with you.
Yeah.
Do you need to come
Dude,
with
does she
us?
really? Like, we just need some eye candy for the male viewers, basically why
Yeah.
she's in this film.
Well, there's this one. So the whole way to Rio Lobo, they find her. They're going to Rio Lobo, the three of them, and she complains constantly about being cold. Like in numerous scenes, she's cold.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, they walk into Rio Lobo, and she has this giant coat on, and I'm like, what the heck? Where did that? The coat
It just came from nowhere?
Yeah, just I don't know, this giant fur coat, her like up to her ears with like fur on it, and I'm like, this whole time you had that coat, but we had to have all these remarks about you being cold and. Like there was no attention to detail. Where's the script supervisor to like point these little things out?
So this wouldn't be your favorite film of the 1970s if you had to make a list?
No, probably not.
I forgot to ask you earlier, Brandon, what are a couple of your favorites? Like going back to the 70s, if Rio Lobo's really far down on the list, what's at the top of
Well, if
that
we're
decade?
looking for a better Western, Blazing Saddles.
Blazing Saddles. Yeah, that title has come up a lot on the podcast. I feel like it comes up
I was thinking about Mel Brooks' work recently. I rewatched some Spaceballs and some of the other ones. And Blazing Saddles, especially in today's day and age, I think has held up better than a lot of the other ones. It's just a good movie. I like it, I think, too, because the movie takes itself seriously while being silly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's always worked. Because that one was so controversial. The ideas in that movie are so controversial for the time that it was made.
Yeah, you couldn't make that movie today. That's like in terms of like some of the scenes in Blazing Saddles. You're like, oh, okay. Such a great cast. Madeline Kahn got an Oscar nomination for that movie, which is kind of crazy. You usually don't get nominations for acting for like spoof movies like that, but she got one. Yeah. And he also made that film. He made Blazing Saddles the same year as Young Frankenstein. Both of those movies came out in the same year. Can you imagine? Like two classic comedies that, fans of comedy love both of those movies. They came out in the same calendar year.
The same cast, same director.
Yeah, he has kind of his troupe. Yeah, I would agree that Blazing Saddles is a much better film than Rio Lobo.
Better Western, and it's just making fun of Westerns.
Yeah. Any other films of that decade that come to mind that you really love?
The ones I wrote down there, I mean, these are ones that like everybody has to see. Like, it's funny thinking like my kids now who are like 7, 5, and 2. Yeah. Go back and eventually like they have a lot more catching up to do, right? Because there's more films now. But the ones they have to see are like Willy Wonka. You
Yep.
know, you got to see the original Star Wars, obviously, but like Jaws,
Jaws.
Alien,
Hmm.
you know, even stuff like Apocalypse Now. It's like you have to see it because like that wasn't necessarily my favorite film, but it's like a significant film. Like The Godfather must be seen
Hmm.
because you have to understand its significance.
So you're gonna do a little marathon with your kids in a few days and watch The Godfather and Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, yeah, I think you'll enjoy that.
I think your 2-year-old will really love Apocalypse Now. Show the Redux version.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Remember we saw that in the theater? That like
yeah,
it had like 45 minutes of extra footage. And
yeah.
I'm
Just
like, I'm doing this. Like we're like 15, 16 years old. I'm like, I don't know about this one.
yeah, just keep going. I also listed for the '70s like the Woody Allen, the better Woody Allen films like
Oh yeah.
Annie Hall and like Love and Death, like those
Love and
ones.
Death is funny. Yeah. Sleeper's really funny. Yeah.
Yeah, Sleeper, like those ones. You know, speaking of a director who maybe should have stopped a little bit
Oh
ago.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We haven't talked
Um,
about Mr. Allen very much on the podcast. He's obviously a very influential figure of the '70s, right? He made a lot of
yeah,
classic films, so we'll definitely get to him. But yeah, that's an example of a director who pumped one out a year every
yeah,
year. It
no
was
matter
like it
what.
was like clockwork. It was like how people treat fitness in the morning.
Yeah,
Like another script, another film, another script. I don't think he ever took a year off until recently, where they're like not
yeah,
letting him make films anymore.
yeah,
Like he even nobody will work with him now, but he still wrapped another film recently. Like he has another film coming.
yeah.
Like he got like the 4 actors who would agree to work with him.
Yeah.
But yeah, Annie Hall, Manhattan, Love and Death. I mean, he has some important films there too. Uh, any other Western? I mean, we've talked about the Western a little bit on the podcast before. The '70s is not a great time for the Western genre. Like, I think Blazing Saddles is probably the most famous of the decade, right? We have a little bit from Clint Eastwood, right? He did a few in the '70s. We talked a few months ago about a really good Western that came out in 1970, which is called Monty Walsh, with Lee Marvin and Jack Palance. That's a great Western. The movie, if you're going to watch a 1970 Western, skip Rio Lobo and check out Monty Walsh, which is a film I feel like a lot of people might not know about. It's actually really, really, really good film and easy to find on the streamers and things. Definitely check that one out. But yeah, Rio Lobo, it was just like, sometimes you watch a movie, Brandon, and about an hour in and you're like, this is not going to get better.
Yeah.
Like, now, okay, you're looking at your watch, you're looking at your phone, like, okay, how long is this? About 2 hours.
Yeah.
I feel like this easily could have been 90 minutes and we would not have lost anything, you know?
Yeah. Well, there's just
Monty Walsh is 90 minutes and it's like the perfect length for that movie. It didn't need to be
yeah.
2 hours. This
This
did
one
not
was
need to
over.
be 2 hours.
Rio Lobo was over 2 hours, I believe, here, and you wonder there's so much stuff to
It
cut
felt
out.
like it.
What was that one scene? So he's running through the town at night trying to not get caught, right?
Yeah.
The character Pierre, and he goes into a cabin, just randomly picks a cabin, goes in, and there's just a topless woman. Speaking of being rated G, but remember she was
We
covered
don't
up.
see her. Yeah, we don't see
You don't
her.
see her, but she's still
Yeah.
topless. Like in a G-rated movie today.
G-rated movie. G-rated means there is nothing that anyone could,
Yeah.
object to, right?
But
Like
he goes
almost
in there.
everything now gets PG because there's
Oh
always
yeah.
going to be something.
Like he goes in there, she's topless, and she's like flirting, coming on to him, and he's just trying to hide from a bad guy chasing him.
Yeah.
He's like, let's just like
Let's have
make
a chat.
something of this. And he's just like casually ignoring her, and you're like, what is going on?
Yeah, this movie does not. I mean, most westerns don't have great roles for women, but this is
Yeah.
definitely one where the women are just kind of one-dimensional, tossed aside. I mean, we do get the ending of this movie. One of the women characters, played by Sherry Lansing, kills the bad guy, and she's like, "See, I told you, McNally, whatever his name. I was gonna do it, and I did."
Yeah.
So this happens all the time in the podcast. I usually don't reveal the very last scene of the movie in case you want to watch it, but I feel like we should talk about the last scene because it is one of the better moments, like to actually see this woman who's been victimized shoot this guy dead. I thought that was, of all the flaws in this movie, that was actually kind of a nice way for it to go out, even though it ends very abruptly. Like it just
yeah,
ends. You're
yeah.
like,
Just
oh, okay. There's not
it
like a
should've-
closing scene, like the kind of like, it just
well,
credits.
that's why it was so weird. So yeah, she shoots him. They stand up. Uh, John Wayne puts his arm around her and says, "Well, that's it," and like they
Time to go.
walk away. And like, there's no closure for any of the other characters.
Yeah,
Like,
there's not like a final curtain call in any
I don't
way.
even know. I don't even know where like Shasta was in the final scene. Like, what happened to her? She wasn't even there. I don't think.
Yeah, and this goes to, I think, Howard
Villain?
Hawks a little bit, which is the next question about this movie. Like, what did Howard Hawks bring to this movie as a director? I think he was, I assume he was there for most of the shoot, right?
Mhm.
And probably said some things to the actors, but I don't think he was like really there. Like, he
Yeah.
was not into this. You can feel it in a movie where the director's passion isn't there. I mean, sometimes you'll see the director's passion on the screen that's done in a negative way where it makes the movie too much. I mean, there's all certain ways that happen, but like this case, I feel like he just was not very present on set. He was not super into this movie. I forgot to say on the background information, there is a quote from Howard Hawks about Rio Lobo. Do you know what he said about it?
Oh, what?
Uh,
What?
I didn't think it was any good. That was his quote I found about his feelings about Rio Lobo. I didn't think it was any good. But yeah, it just like maybe it's his older age. Maybe it's just he had been through the story before. He'd worked with Wayne before. It was probably just kind of like very comfortable. He's not outside the box at all here. And I think some of these directors, John Ford is another one. They get up in age, and there's something kind of lacking. There's just not a whole lot of urgency or energy on the screen. And this movie, man, there are long stretches of just like nothing. I'm just like, okay, give us something here. Give us an action scene or something. Like, it's just not a whole lot happening for stretches of this movie.
Yeah, I mean, there's the whole scene where that one lady, again, they're trying to hide for a lot of the movie for whatever reason, and then she decides to like shampoo her hair, and it's like we're gonna watch. We're not just gonna like say she does it. We're gonna watch her do the
Mhm.
whole process. And like, all right, you know.
And was there motivation for the dentist scene? Like, was there like a setup for that? Like, why was that in the movie?
He, I can't even remember why he goes
I
in
just
there.
remember I'm like, why is he at the dentist? What does that have to do with the plot?
He had like a question. Remember, he didn't even need to go to the dentist.
Oh, okay. You had to ask him a
He was
question.
hiding. Again, they were hiding for so much of the time. That's where they figured out where that guy told him where like the final guy was hiding out or whatever.
Okay. Oh, gotcha. Okay. So there is like one little beat we need to know,
Yeah,
like for
yeah,
the audience, but then we have like a 3-minute, 4-minute scene of him getting his teeth worked on. I'm like, what?
yeah,
And there's also a lot of John Wayne drinking in this movie, right?
yeah.
I
Oh
feel
yeah,
like there at least 3 scenes where he like walks into a bar and he's like, "Don't give me that cheap stuff. Give me the bottle in the back," right?
yeah,
And then he sits down. We see him pour it for himself, pour it for the people he's with. Takes a drink. It's like when it happens for like the third time, I'm like, let's just get to the scene here. Like we don't have. We can cut to them already having the drinks.
yeah,
We don't have to see them come in
yeah.
and order, for the third time or whatever, how many scenes that is in this. But yeah, and he looks a little bit rough in this. Speaking of performances, it's kind of the next question. Like, he still has the great commanding presence, but True Grit was a year before this, and he's such a better performer in True Grit. Like, you can feel like he's doing something a little bit different in True Grit, and I think that's why he got all the buzz for the Oscars and eventually winning. And here he's just kind of going through the motions, and you can tell like he was battling some sort of an illness. He was recovering from an injury. Like, he's just not bringing 100% of his charisma that he usually does in some of his earlier films.
Yeah. He just again he looks like he's getting older. He's getting less fit. You
He's
know,
not very fit in this.
not fit. I mean, that was my biggest takeaway. Is he's supposed to be this action hero who
Yeah,
gunslinger, and he doesn't fit the role. Like
yeah,
almost like they wrote the movie knowing that it was for John Wayne, but it was supposed to be for John Wayne like 12 years earlier.
yeah. This
But
is
like
like 1958 John Wayne, but he doesn't look the way he used to.
Yeah, and so like it just felt off. Like the casting fell off.
Yeah, did you see the on the poster what it says at the top of the poster? It says give him hell, John. That's like in big letters on the poster, and then Rio
Oh yeah.
Lobo.
Oh, I
I'm
see
like, oh,
it.
that would bring people into the theater, like right, like if you're a John Wayne fan and oh, a new Howard Hawks movie with Rio in the title, and the poster says "Give him hell, John," I'd be like, sign me up. And again, that's not the movie you get here. This is like a very safe, tame, G-rated. Like it's like you can't even go PG, Howard.
Yeah.
Like show a little bit of the violence, maybe. It's 1970 here, not 1958.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, I see the poster now. Like the poster has a corpse on it. Like there's going to be a
Yeah.
bunch of like, Wild West shootouts and stuff, and that's not what this film was about. It's not a big action film. There's just one big shootout at the end and the opening action sequence, and that was mostly it. I mean, a couple other.
I think if they had delivered the movie that the poster promised, like that people wanted to see, I think this would have made twice as much money or more. Right.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
people,
yeah.
I could see people, fans of John Wayne's, walking out being like, that wasn't one of his better efforts. I mean, nobody's walking out of this like raving to their friends, right? Oh my God,
Yeah.
you got to see the new John Wayne. It's the best one yet. Like, I don't see anyone doing that.
Oh, no way. There's just not enough goes on in the film. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
It's like 40 minutes of plot
Yeah.
stretched over 2 hours. Any other scenes that we haven't mentioned that were memorable, either in a positive or a negative way? We get more ladies, right? There was there's that scene where they like hide under the bed, and
Oh, yeah.
there's another female lead, not lead, but like a pretty major character that they encounter in Rio Lobo, who's beautiful, like absolutely gorgeous. I don't know her name, but I mean, the women in this film are strikingly gorgeous. So I
Yeah.
think maybe the men in the audience enjoyed that about it. Oh,
Yeah. They definitely cast some
you
good
know,
looking women, but they gave them such terrible roles. It's like there's
just
nothing.
like, yeah,
They honestly didn't even need any of those characters, really. I mean, they were barely even a plot device.
yeah.
You know, they're
My
just
fa-
there.
and then the last shootout, which is kind of fun. Like it's been like a long stretch of nothing happening. So when we actually get to like, them like exchanging this guy for that guy, and then the shootout, and John Wayne gets hit like in the side. I mean, there's some stuff going on in the last 10 minutes. It's kind of fun. And I love the part where the big guy he has like the dynamite and he's running, and then they shoot him in the gut and he's like, oh, but then as he's going down, he just kind of like tosses the dynamite, and they all go, oh, get down. And then it blows up. And that was kind of a fun little bit at the end.
Yeah, it's good thing they threw. It's good that they put a little something in there. Like that, honestly, I feel like that during that part, I looked away and then like it blew up on the screen and I looked back and I was like, wait a second.
Oh, you missed that. You missed the guy, like, very
I went
dramatically.
back and watched
Like,
it because I was like, wait a second, did they just actually do something exciting? The heck?
well, it's G-rated, so God forbid we see the wound. You don't see anything. He just goes like, oh, and he's like, it's like a
Yeah.
very dramatic, like, I need to show that I've been shot kind of performance.
Yeah.
But then he like manages to toss the dynamite forward anyway, but it doesn't go inside, so it doesn't really hurt anybody.
Yeah.
That was kind of fun. So yeah, I mean, in between the opening and closing action sequences, there's just not a whole lot. And not to say that we need action all the time. Monty Walsh, the other Western I watched for 1970, has very little action. Not until the last 20 minutes do we really get any suspense or tension. But the characters are much more three-dimensional, more interesting. The relationships are better in that film than they are here. And yeah, again, I would go with Monty Walsh if you want a Western from this year. Rio Lobo. Howard Hawks. Some directors go out on a high note. Very few of them do, but some have. Howard Hawks, unfortunately, master director, so many classic works that I'm going to talk about in a minute here. This was not his finest hour by a long shot. Yeah. So my last question about Rio Lobo, which I ask of each guest, is kind of, looking at this film through through a 2020 lens. For our listeners, it's now 2021, right? which is crazy to think we made it through 2020, Brandon.
Yes.
So like we've talked about the dated aspects of this movie, some of the misogyny and just the lack of like anything current 1970 era. Like this feels very old fashioned. Like, so anything else you thought was dated about it that we didn't discuss? Or if they were to remake Rio Lobo in 2021, like what would be different about this movie? If they took the same story and made it today, what would be different about it now?
I think the one thing to me that stands out is like the way they portray the Southern soldiers,
Okay.
right? So, he teams up with the other main character, really, is a Southern soldier, the captain of the South.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird to me, like, I don't know what the tone was in the 1970s, but it was almost like, well, war's over. We're all friends now.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I don't think I've ever seen another film where the soldiers, the Southern soldiers, are just portrayed as like, well, we were just soldiers, no big,
Mm-hmm.
no harm, no foul.
Yeah.
It was wartime. And that's like kind of how it's spun here. They're usually in film portrayed as the villains. And you could tell that, like, I kind of thought that was going to be the tone in this film, because even in that opening sequence, they're not portrayed, they're dirtier than obviously the Northern Army.
Mm-hmm.
But that's about it. They're not really portrayed as wild, villainous as you get a lot of times in these films. Like usually there's, again, because the South was more the side of slavery. You don't usually just see this like, yeah, oh yeah, no, they're just normal people like you and us, and we had some disagreements, and now we're all cool and we can be friends. Like, I think if they did it again today and they were going to remake it, obviously it'd be a much more gritty film.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they would have had those two characters, never would have just kind of gone together and had a good relationship. They would have had to find a way to force them together reluctantly, and play off of that. More the why are these two characters who are mortal enemies trying to kill each other in the war? What would force them to stay together? Certainly not to hunt down the traitor, the one, that wouldn't bring them together.
Like, I think that was one of the most interesting aspects of the movie, was that they're kind of enemies at the start, and then they kind of band together to take down this other traitor in Rio Lobo. I feel like that would be played up a lot more in a new version. The characters would just be better drawn. They'd be richer. They'd be more complex. I think the actors, I mean, depending on who directed it, what it was made for, streamer, film, whatever. I think the band of actors they'd get together would be better than the ones we get in the 1970 version. I just think there'd be more energy. There'd be more like the pacing would be quicker, and we'd have a more engaging story. Because I think there are aspects of this that could be, could make for a good film. It's just the way it's presented in the 1970 film. It just it never comes to life. We didn't even talk about the score. Did you notice that action sequence at the beginning had no music?
Yeah,
there was no music. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's a choice. It's kind of a weird one, but okay. But then later, they're just like traveling to Rio Lobo, and then the music's going crazy. So I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So there is a score to the movie. So Howard Hawks like turned to his composer, or whoever, no music for the action sequence at the beginning. Okay. I don't know if you noticed that. I mean, how rare is it to see an action sequence of 5-10 minutes in a movie, especially at the beginning, and have no music of any kind?
Yeah. No, that was interesting. Again, I think maybe it's how we were saying the film feels like it's the wrong. It was made in 1970, but it feels like it should have been made
in the 50s.
Early. Yeah.
Or early 60s. Yeah. And I think if one of these films was to be remade, probably Rio Bravo would be remade, because that's more famous. That's a better film. I feel like more people know Bravo than Lobo. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're a few decades away, Brandon, from a Rio Lobo remake. But if they want to do it again, we just gave them some ideas. I don't think either one of us is going to remake Rio Lobo. It's not on the top of our list of priorities.
No. I mean, they remade True Grit a couple years ago. Remember that one?
Yeah. So True Grit got a remake in 2010 with Jeff Bridges and Haley Steinfeld, and that was a great film. It made it didn't make my top 10 of 2010, but it made my second 10, and it was really strong. I mean, you get the Coen brothers to do Rio Lobo, it's going to be good.
Yeah, exactly.
I would be there opening day or at home on HBO Max. I think they could tackle this material really well. You know, the directors who really understand the Western genre and have a passion for it, and you know, can do something a little bit more contemporary with it. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see if it ever comes. But yeah, so that's Rio Lobo. It's the final film of 1970. I'm doing a full recording about. Not the greatest of the films. Not the worst though, Brandon.
No.
Go try to watch Where's Papa?
Ooh.
by Carl Reiner, starring George Siegel. The only thing that has going for it more than Rio Lobo is that it's 80 minutes long. If Where's Papa had been 2 hours, I don't know if I could have made it to the end of it. Yeah, I've watched a few stinkers. You know, I've often told people my favorite decade of film is the 70s, and there's still a lot I haven't gotten to. But there's still some stinkers around here. It's not like every movie that comes out is just like brilliant.
Yeah.
You know, for every 5 easy pieces, we get a few Rio Lobos. All right, so that takes us to our final 2 segments. The first one is the Divine Double Feature. That's where we pick a more contemporary film and kind of pair it with our movie that we just talked about. So what would be a film of like the last 20-ish years that would be kind of a fun movie to watch directly after our listeners have suffered through Rio Lobo?
So I only picked this one because I just watched this one this week immediately before watching this film. And it wasn't even, that was before I knew we were going to do this podcast. I just had watched it because I hadn't seen it in a couple of years and it was on Netflix, but I just watched Django Unchained. And so, you know.
Brandon, it took 20 episodes. It has happened. That was my choice too.
Oh yeah, see?
The first crossover. It finally happened.
You know, it was again, it was because it's on Netflix right now. Is that where you watched it?
No, I was just because of the Quentin Tarantino quote. I was thinking like, what's a contemporary Western that I really enjoyed of like the last 10 years? And my choices were, I mean, I looked at a list of the 20 best Westerns of the last 10 years, and I had seen some of them, like Bone Tomahawk's kind of interesting, the Kurt Russell movie. And I liked Hateful Eight. It's just really talking. I'm like, if you're going to do a double feature, like I could not go from 2 hours of Rio Lobo to almost 3 hours of the very talky Hateful Eight. So yeah, I was like, if I was going to pick one that I like, you need a palate cleanser, something fun, great cast, a lot of energy and style. I went with Django Unchained as well.
Yeah. Well, it's like everything they did in that movie is like the exact opposite of Rio Lobo. Bad guys are really, really bad.
Yeah.
You know, violence is extreme to the extreme.
Very extreme.
You know, and that's why it's like, man, I just need to get that awful taste of Rio Lobo out of my mouth.
Yeah.
I go Unchained because
and it's just so much fun. I haven't watched it in a while. I need to do like a Quentin couple months or something. It's been a while since I've seen like any of his films, actually, since Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That was about a year and a half ago. But yeah, Django Unchained, his first of 2 Westerns. I mean, there's like some Western aspects to some of his other films. Like there's a Western vibe to Kill Bill Volume 2, right? There's some stuff there, which is still my favorite Quentin movie. Is I think of Kill Bill as just one giant movie. That's my favorite project of his. But Django Unchained is certainly up there. Django Unchained is the only film he won a Best Screenplay Oscar like solely by himself. His first film that he won the screenplay award, he shared with Roger Avary, and that was for Pulp Fiction. Was Django Unchained the movie that needed to win him his Oscar? I don't know if that's like the best screenplay he'd done since Pulp Fiction, but definitely one of the better ones.
Oh yeah, no, the screenplay in that one is, I mean, he has some long like talky scenes, but they're always they keep you hooked the whole time.
Yeah.
You know,
he gets a great cast to deliver those lines well. I mean, he got DiCaprio for that movie. That was, you know, that's the only film that they had collaborated on until Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. DiCaprio's great in it. Jamie Foxx is fantastic. Christoph Waltz won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor for Django Unchained. And then it's probably Samuel L. Jackson's best work in a long while, right? His character in that film. Like that was, you know, we kind of got used to Jackson in Marvel, right? Like we take him for granted. Like we don't really think of him as a good actor anymore. But then Django Unchained, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. He's a great actor. Like, we don't see that very much. So yeah, I would pick Django too. That's a fun one. And it's on Netflix right now, so it's easy to find.
Exactly.
You might want to just skip Rio Lobo and just watch Django.
Yeah, watch that one twice, actually.
just watch Django twice back to back. All right, Brandon. So that takes us to our final segment, which is called Beyond the Flick. And part of the reason, the big reason I chose Rio Lobo was this would be the one and only chance I would get to talk about Howard Hawks on the podcast since Rio Lobo was his last movie. We talked about a little bit before. You are familiar with his films and his career, but you have not seen any of his other films. So your introduction to Howard Hawks was Rio Lobo.
Yeah, yeah. No. I looked through the filmography here on IMDb, and it was like I recognize the names, but I'm
Titles,
like,
yeah.
yeah, but I don't think I I don't remember actually sitting down to watch any of these.
Yeah, so he is one of those directors who would do different genres. And I'm all, there's like people like Hitchcock where you expect a certain kind of film every time out, and that's all great and everything. But then there's some of these directors who have the talent to do different genres and different kinds of things, who have the opportunities to do different kinds of films. And Howard Hawks, when you look at his filmography, it's kind of insane that he's made some of the most classic movies of the 30s and 40s in different genres, right? So you get Scarface from 1932. And that's like a really classic gangster movie, of course, remade later with Al Pacino by Brian De Palma in 83. That's a strong film. The main actor in that, Paul Muni, is a really fantastic actor of the 1930s. I've seen a few of his projects. I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, or of a Chain Gang, I always forget, is one of my favorite movies of the 1930s, Brandon. I would recommend it if you've never heard of it or seen it. It's got kind of a weird title. Really compelling prison drama, kind of like if Shawshank Redemption were made in the 30s. Really great. So yeah, Scarface came out the same year, and that was Howard Hawks. That was probably his first like really classic film. And then other films that were on my runners up that I've seen. It's been a while, so I don't have a lot to say in terms of like specificity about some of these, but His Girl Friday, 1940, Cary Grant, romantic comedy, is really funny and classic, kind of a classic title there. Sergeant York, 1941. So now we're looking at a war movie. To Have and Have Not from 1944, which was the film debut of Lauren Bacall. That's the one with Humphrey Bogart. That's the film that they met and fell in love on. That's a classic film. There's been some controversy about The Thing from Another World. Have you heard of that one from the 50s? It's like a science fiction horror film. There's a different director listed, like as the director of the film, but apparently it's I guess it's that like Poltergeist situation where Toby Hooper is considered the director of Poltergeist, but Steven Spielberg was very hands-on on the set. And so there's like this controversy. Did Spielberg actually direct Poltergeist? Because it feels very much like a Spielberg movie. Apparently, Howard Hawks, the producer of The Thing, was there on set and very hands-on. And so there's some confusion. Like it's kind of a Hawks movie in some respects. But so we'll never know exactly who directed The Thing, but he was very much involved. That's a great, fun, early 50s science fiction movie if you haven't seen it. And then Rio Bravo, which is easily the best of those three I mentioned, right? Of Rio Lobo, El Dorado, and Rio Bravo. The best of those three. I haven't seen the second one, so I can't say if that one's better, but Rio Bravo is much better, at least, than Rio Lobo. So my favorites of his, the best Western I've seen by Howard Hawks is called Red River. And that's also with John Wayne. It's from 1948. And Montgomery Clift was his breakthrough movie for him. So if you were to see one other Howard Hawks Western, the one I would recommend is Red River. It's really compelling. Late 40s, but it's kind of gritty. It's grittier than Rio Lobo. It was. I saw it a few years ago, but I remember really liking that one. And I'm not a huge Western person, but that one's pretty strong. So that's a Western. My second favorite is The Big Sleep from 1946, which is a film noir, and that's also Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. Again, it's been a few years. I can't remember a lot of the details, but like a really, really strong story and a lot of atmosphere. And like of the 40s film noirs, The Big Sleep is one of the most famous. So that might be one to check out soon. But then easily my favorite, and this is the one I saw a couple years ago for the first time on Turner Classic Movies, and that's Bringing Up Baby from 1938. That's Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant and a wild leopard, and it's like this zany, wacky screwball comedy. Really, really fun. Huge box office bomb at the time. Katharine Hepburn had like a string of box office bombs around the late 30s, and she was considered box office poison until she did the Philadelphia Story in 1940 with Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart. But Bringing a Baby has been like rediscovered years later, and it's really funny. Like, it's one of my favorite comedies of the 30s by far. Worth a look.
Bringing Up Baby.
Kind of a goofy title. What is it? What's the famous quote from that movie? This is 1938, and Cary Grant says something like, I woke up and I felt gay all of a sudden. And it's like, okay, different time.
Yeah.
And he's wearing like a woman's dress, or like or like a woman's blouse, or what does he have on? Like, it's just like, it's a lot of fun. Like, if you like those two figures at all, if you like Hepburn and Cary Grant, it's one of their best work, and they work great off each other. They work great off each other in the Philadelphia Story. Have you seen that one, the 1940 Philadelphia Story? I saw it in film school. It's really funny. James Stewart is also in it, and he won a Best Actor Oscar. And I would say that's even better than Bringing a Baby. But of the 30s and of the work of Howard Hawks, my favorite film that I've seen of his would be Bringing a Baby.
Nice. I'll check it out.
So you have some Howard Hawks homework.
Yeah, right. Where do you find
I've been doing this for a few years, where in January of each year I pick an actor and I pick a director, and I spend the year like going through their filmography film by film. Like for 2020 I did the films of Joan Crawford, and 2021 I'm doing Betty Davis. So Christmas week of 2021 we're going to screen Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and after 2 years finally bring those two figures together. But I also do directors sometimes, not every year, but I did John Ford a few years back. That's where I really discovered like the work of John Wayne and all the stuff they did together. A lot of really strong films. Looking at Howard Hawks' filmography, there's so many films he did I haven't seen, so I might do Howard Hawks in a few years. Might be fun.
You look at his page, I mean, he's got stuff. He was one of those guys, he had a film every year.
Yeah, really prolific, and not just the same movie over and over. It's like a mix of different genres that, I mean, the fact that he mastered like the gangster movie and the romantic comedy, the screwball comedy, film noir, horror, sci-fi, war films, westerns. I mean, he's doing everything. So that's kind of cool. I like that. All right, Brandon. So that takes us to the end here. Thank you so much for being on Film at 50 today. Where can our listeners find you? Or if you have anything to promote on the web or anything, now's the time to tell us.
Oh, no, I don't have anything to promote. Promote this podcast you're already listening to.
Yeah. Let's get some more listeners. Yeah. Anywhere that our listeners can find you online?
No, not really.
Okay, I mean, so if you want to reach out to Brandon, send a message to me, and I'll relay the message.
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on like social media if you look at my name.
Yeah,
there's nothing exciting.
Brandon Siri, look them up.
You don't have any brands to promote.
You don't have any brands to promote. We could promote our old films. You don't want to promote any of your movies?
Yeah, we should. We should get those online. A bunch of films that were made between like, I don't know, the best ones are like probably like 98 to like 2000 and I don't know, 8.
My best year was 2005. My three favorite short films that I directed were that year. They were all the same year. And then it was just downhill.
That's why I always made stuff. But the thing is funny, like, because we were before YouTube existed. That's the thing.
Yeah, YouTube was like early 06 was when I heard about it.
Yeah, like all of our editing software and stuff we used back then was like a premium. Like nobody had anything. Like, we had the giant cameras, and they were like be for their time. And it's like compared to what we could have access today if we'd been,
Could you imagine if we were in high school? I mean, not this year, but previous years. Like how I think about I remember we would make films. Like I made a lot of films like during lunch at high school. Like I would shoot a scene with actors because I think we had like 45 minutes, Now it's like 25 minutes. You have to be back in the classroom. Like you couldn't do that today. I almost feel like it'd be harder today in some respects, like to make films that are like have like, you know, significant quality that really like, you know, feel like the director. Like nowadays, everyone just has their phones, everyone's doing stuff, and it's kind of harder to find the quality work. Whereas back when we were like in high school, we were like the only two people making movies.
Well, that's what I was saying. Like, I haven't even looked up cameras these days. Like, what's a camera that like you can purchase for your house that's not on a phone? What does that even look like these
Yeah,
days?
they were
What's
so
the quality?
expensive. Like back
Yeah,
in 02, 03, they were so expensive.
like if you wanted a video
Now,
camera
yeah.
today for like $2,000, let's say that's still an expensive camera. But what do you get with
I
that?
bet you
Like,
get something a lot nicer than we had. Anyway, yeah, so that was fun. Making movies, talking movies with you, Brandon, always a blast. So thank you
yeah,
for being on Film at 50 today. And thank you to everyone for listening. You can catch Film at 50 online at filmat50.com. We're on all the socials like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can email us at 50yearsagoinfilm@gmail.com. Check out the Patreon page. Brandon and I have 4 exclusive chats about movies on the Patreon page, including discussions of Tenet and the new remake of The Witches, among others. So check that out and support the podcast. Until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.